a bit of a context, the imperative, some of the things that are going on. Lewis is going to talk through some case studies that we have seen in action that hopefully will give you some food for thought and some sort of specific examples of how tech can be applied. And Professor Will Brown, who we're lucky to have here, he's going to keynote it. We've been talking him up all week. Will is our chair in AI and manufacturing, so more and more you're probably starting hearing the words digital capability and artificial intelligence. We cover Industry 4.0 at Hub, even though our name is Advanced Robotics for Manufacturing. So we cover all of the technologies, and we'll talk a little bit to the connections between robotics and AI and Industry 4.0 and get stuck into that. So what is Hub? Essentially, we're an independent, not-for-profit. And we've been set up with core funding from major partners, which enables us to do some things that can help industries in Queensland. Really, we've been founded on this really critical need in Queensland to start to reboost and regrow manufacturing. In particular, the need to build capability around these technologies and thinking about that in different ways to the traditional education programs. How do we actually build that capability in a journey sense? And I guess essentially, how do we accommodate some of the big issues that we've been facing in industries around supply chains and the skills shortages? How can technology help to, in a complementary way, grow manufacturing? And really, the other key point that needs to be made is that when you think about manufacturing in Queensland and you think about technology adoption, often the examples that you see are big business incorporating this tech. The issue for Queensland, though, is that we're not mostly big business. We're mostly, over 99% of manufacturing is small to medium enterprises, and you don't see a lot of examples of how technology is adopted in small to medium enterprises. So we're really here to bridge that. We're also here because part of the challenge is large organisations are really readily able to tap into R&D and innovation, and they do it all the time. So we're here to bridge that gap. We have membership of almost all universities in Queensland, even though our founding partner was QUT. We can connect into that expertise and help. How do you commercialise then that R&D, that expertise, and get it into your business? That's our job to help. Yes, so the nice graph. How are we going to get small business to be medium-sized business and some of those medium-sized businesses to be large? Yeah, so we work and we work in an ecosystem. This is the important point to be made in this slide. We're not in isolation. And we don't work it's never a single technology that usually is the solution to a complex challenge. It's usually a combination of things. So we work across all of those Industry 4.0 technologies, and essentially we work in a model of industry engagement, accessing R&D and expertise, and some solutions to help start to commercialise that, whether it be a feasibility study or proof of concept, but something that can help you to see how it would be applied in your context. And that's just to give you an indication and remind me to say that it's not just about engineers either. So at Hub, we bring together people with design strength, business strength. So it's actually about a range of different disciplines that can help design to manufacture a solution that's going to get you your outcome. So we're actually a small core team, much like the Manufacturing Hub and much like the Resource Industry Network. Our team core team is small, but the way we manage to do it is we tap into that expertise from across the uni. So if you popped into our Northgate facility, which we would absolutely welcome you to do if you're ever in Brisbane, you would find that there's a whole range of different people sitting there who are experts in their fields. They come out and work at the Hub, and that's great because you're getting that cross-disciplinary solution to challenges. And yeah, I won't talk about that, it's just spookiness. But this is the key thing. Then what does it actually look like if you're talking about, you've said a lot of things, but what do you actually do? What does Armour actually do? Well, essentially we do things like this. So we talk about the technology, we show examples, we build that pool of examples to share amongst industry, and particularly the answer might be something that's in quite a different industry to the one you're in, because it's technology and it's applied in different ways across different fields. We apply commercial solutions, so we do things like technology demonstrations or sprints or feasibility studies or proof of concept. Often with the technology, it may not have been applied in that particular way, or to tackle that particular problem, and you have to test it out. So it's a de-risking strategy we apply to help test it out in your context before you go and spend the money buying the expensive equipment and implementing a solution. And then we help companies access grants, or other funding opportunities. So if it's if it's something to do with exporting overseas or getting investors, we would refer you to a friendly agency that we work with. But if it's accessing a government grant, we can help you with your application, have a look over it, help you shape it, help you cost it up, maybe even help you build in a feasibility study or proof of concept to push it up your manufacturing readiness levels in the application. So that gives you a bit of a sense. So yes, we are located in Brisbane, but we very much cover all of Queensland. And now that COVID's given us a little bit of a breathing space, we've been getting up into the regions a lot more. Last year was terrible. We weren't able to get into the regions really at all. And we've got partnerships with some of the key institutions across the country who also really have expertise in this area, and we try to bring that in when we can. Hand over to Lewis.
Thanks, mate. Navigate around this tripod that I set up. Careful with that. So, hi everyone, my name's Lewis. I'm the Business Development Officer for the Arm Hub. So I work alongside Melissa, and every day we're sort of going out and meeting businesses to understand how they manufacture, what their business is doing, where they're trying to get to, and what technologies may be applicable to them. How we help people changes every day because everyone's business is different by design. That's how it is. So, although Mel's sort of given a high-level overview of our services, the best way to explain how we do it is through case studies. So, to show the real benefit to these SME manufacturers that came to us with a challenge, and then through working through a collaborative partnership, we helped them get to a solution that meant they had business growth. So we are the Advanced Robotics for Manufacturing Hub. Every SME we've helped, every business we've helped has grown employees and grown their business from a financial point of view as well. So if anyone ever tells you that robots are here to take your job, it's the exact opposite. And that's what we are funded to do by the state government, is to grow business. So we definitely aren't here to replace jobs. What we are here to do is to help people adopt new technologies so that they can grow their business and increase the capability of what they do and be smarter manufacturers. It also means that the people on the floor actually building get to broaden their skills and get to use robotics, which is pretty cool. It's got some great knock-on effects to employers. The first company we're going to talk about is Urban Arts Projects. Now, Urban Arts Projects is a founding partner of the Arm Hub, the founding industry partner. So Mel spoke before, we have QUT as the founding research partner. These are the founding industry partners. Urban Arts Projects are the world's largest public art fabricator. So you might have seen some of their stuff on LinkedIn if you follow us, but they are really unique in that they manufacture public art. So every one of their projects is completely unique. They're a large foundry that does a lot of aluminium and bronze casting of sculptures. They have a unique challenge in that they sit between the artist that has a creative intent or a vision that must be upheld, but then they get contracts with developers, property developers, who only have a certain amount of budget and only have a program that usually they want everything yesterday. So UAP, as a public art fabricator, is to sit between those parties and deliver projects that usually haven't been done before or are not repeated. So they're not pumping out, they're not mass producing parts one after the other. Everything's unique. So they have a workshop in Brisbane, which is their headquarters, where the company started about 27 years ago. Started up by two brothers in Brisbane. Now they've got foundries and workshops in China and the United States, so they've gone global. But 4 or 5 years ago, they embarked on a journey to stay cost competitive. They provide a turnkey solution to public art. So what that means is if you're a client, you go to them and say, I need art for my building or my development. So they'll go out and source the artist, they'll contract the artist, they'll have design teams to work with the artist to build something that's feasible for the budget. Then they have the manufacturers, and then they have the installers. So they've got a lot of overheads. All those people are over and above just the manufacturers. So they realised they needed to automate to stay cost competitive, because a straight up steel fabricator all day long will beat them on price because they don't have the overheads of those design and curatorial teams sitting upstairs. So they work with QUT, another university, RMIT, and the ARM Hub through a grant program that was funded through the IMCRC to support their Industry 4.0 transformation. And we say transformation because it's taking the current business state and transforming it into a business that's automated and using new technologies. The first project they did, they worked with QUT, is this open innovation network where they invited an artist to come and trial some technology. Previously, UAP were designing everything traditionally with 2D and 3D CAD software that was quite basic. And the pattern makers, I don't know if many of you know pattern makers as a trade, it's pretty much there's not that many of them around anymore, but pattern makers are used in their business to make forms for the sand casting process. So if you were to put that timber maquette into the sand, it would make an impression, and then you fill that with aluminium or bronze and you get your cast piece. So the first project that they looked at is an artist by Emily Floyd. So she brought in a small scale timber maquette, her family of toy makers. So she made that by hand, but the real piece needed to be 2 meters tall. So they first scanned the piece using this handheld scanning technology, which then gave them a digital file. Once they had that digital file, they were able to put the virtual reality goggles on and walk around the artwork before it was made. So for an artist, that's brilliant. If they can see the artwork and have confidence that their vision is going to be delivered, they're extremely happy. Then once you have that 3D file, that was then used to work on their first robot they integrated, which is effectively a 6-axis router. So you've gone from traditional process where a pattern maker would have had to look at that small scale maquette and use pattern making techniques to upscale it, and in that it takes a lot of time and it's inaccurate. So what they've done is they've scanned it, they've got an accurate model, and they've gone straight to fabrication. This is an image of, this is a video, sorry. This is their lead pattern maker, Yurko. Yurko tells his story through his tattoos. So in order to introduce the staff on the floor, they said, let's scan Yurko, capture his story, but capture a 3D file so that we can trial the router to cut out his form. So pattern makers use foam and timber. It's readily available, it's cheap, it's easy to manipulate. So when you're making a pattern, it doesn't have to be a robust object, it just needs to be something to make an impression in sand. So they scanned Yurko, and then this is the robot in action. So we mentioned the 6-axis, the turntable the part is sitting on spins, and then that robot can come in pretty much at any angle as well. So this was the very first prototype that they did, or first sort of piece that they cut in the router. And that's the second piece, the polystyrene. So through that, they were introducing their workshop staff through this new technology. So Yurko, who spent his life in the film industry carving props for movies, and usually background stuff, he's now seeing how these technologies work. And this pattern making department is now using the augmented reality division, the virtual reality, and they're programming the robot. So I talk about skills broadening. That's an excellent example of a success story of Dr. Tech. Just to reiterate, what that technology means is that they can cut out that traditional pattern making process. So they've now cut out a week, 2 weeks of their fabrication schedule, which is huge for someone like that, especially a pattern maker of his skill level and his salary. So this is where they're using virtual reality. So this was the next step on the journey for them. They said, right, we've automated capturing 3D files and cutting on the robot. And now what we want to do is look at how virtual reality can help our business. So this was a piece from an architect where they wanted every single balustrade in the building to be completely unique. So you can imagine trying to model up a form of something like this traditionally using CAD. It would be really challenging. It's an undulating form. It's a woven structure or sort of like a scribble. So even just to make a file that the artist is happy with, but also 30 or 40 of them for the outside of the building would have been really challenging. So in virtual reality, they were able to digitally sculpt a file, Then they cut it on the router, and then they used lost foam casting. So you might have heard of lost wax, where you cast material over the wax and the wax evaporates. In this, it was foam, so they had to have some pretty serious extractor hoods above when they were doing that. But what that helped them with is deliver a facade project that every single panel was unique, but they could do it at a price point that the architect and the builder was happy with, because they were using this digital process and a lost foam process, where when you cast directly over the foam, you don't have fettling to remove. You don't have to go through and clean up the casting, which usually takes a long time. So this is an example of where they were using virtual reality to help them sculpt and help that design process. But very importantly, when you have the goggles and when you're in that virtual environment, you're seeing the part before it's made. So you can make decisions, you can align it with the front of the building, and you can zoom in and see where the fixing points need to be. And so you're actually experiencing this thing before it's made. So they're cutting down their design time and they're cutting down fabrication time. All these efficiencies mean that they're getting more cost competitive. This project, again, they said, great, virtual reality is working, now what can we do next? So ArmHub, UT and RMIT said, well, let's go through an augmented reality sprint. So let's help you adopt this technology. This is a structure that's gone into a lobby in a Melbourne commercial building. Technically challenging, lots of curves going different directions, but the architect presented UAP with a 3D file and said, we want that, because we're happy with it, we've designed it, that's what it looks like. The structural engineer is happy, so go ahead and build that. So UAP used augmented reality in order to speed up the fabrication time. Traditionally, someone on the floor would have had to have drawings, which would have been a mess of vertical and horizontal lines, and interpret where to build, where to weld, or where to bring material to. Once the fabrication team had all the points marked up by their designer using augmented reality, they could build that structure in a couple of, 2-3 days. Whereas before, someone had to stand there and go, all right, measure that point out, tack it up, let's go back and check. So you can imagine the efficiency that brought in. And then it moved forward to where now the workers on the floor are even using augmented reality to build complex structures. So this is a structure made up of panel beaten steel items. And the artist, again, very happy with the 3D file and what a confidence that file was going to be delivered. So the boilermakers on the floor are wearing the goggles while they're welding. So what that is they're now overlaying a hologram to the physical, and they're bringing physical parts to the hologram, which means that there are no coordination issues and all the alignment all the way up the structure is working because they're checking against that digital file. And this is a really interesting project. I'm sure you've all worked on something where an estimator, for whatever reason, has undercooked it. And what that means is you're up against it then. You've got to deliver a product in a time frame and you haven't got the hours. So this is Matteo. Matteo is a master finisher from Italy. His job is polishing artworks and finishing. That's his trade. But he's getting to an age now where his back hurts and he doesn't like to do it anymore. And he's seen the technologies they're bringing in and he wants to be someone that uses robots. So he came over to ArmHub and said, I've been given this job. There's 8 really large scale aluminium sheets that need to be linished. And they've given me 2 days to do it. Now, if any of you have linished at scale, you know how long it takes to do it. It's a really skilled job. You need to have a really steady hand and go over the sheet in a series of paths to do the job effectively. So he came to ArmHub and said, I need help. We've got to deliver this thing. It's Christmas, so I've got to have it on the floor to help me. What can you do? So in a couple of days, the engineers from the ArmHub quickly made this mock-up and this jig, fixed one of the robot arms that we have available in our shed, and put a linishing tool on the end of it. So what this meant was Matteo can work alongside the robot, and the robot can do the bulk of the work. So his back is no longer hurting in the day, but importantly, he can now go over and work on another job while this is going away in the background. And because this is only doing 80-90%, it means that he can come back and do the little bits that, admittedly, in a haste to set up the jig, probably should have been thought out a bit more. But it's a great example of how quickly setting up a robot arm to do a task. He's now able to deliver that project on time, on budget, and he's not going home at the end of the day as a sore with sore back pain. So Matteo is a really great success story for them because he's had such a traditional skill trade, and he's now transitioning to a robot operator. So his health's improved, his quality of work's improved, and and is looking for ways to automate further in the business. So how can I use technology like this robot arm in more applications? So we always talk about automation as a journey with businesses. You quite often start to look at solving one challenge, and then you can build efficiency off that one solved challenge. So, okay, I've solved that, now that's working, let's go to the next thing. So when I presented at the start, it is a 4 or 5 year journey to get some of these things. You're never going to be able to automate from day one and say, right, let's go, I want to change my whole workshop. But if you can start to look at it as works packages that you can solve, then you can get to a point where these jobs, you're starting to become cost competitive and you've got the capability in-house to look at doing more. So we had an interesting cab ride yesterday from the airport. We had one bloke that said, so by the sounds of it, you're actually doing yourself out of a job, and that's exactly what we're trying to do. Our business model isn't to be someone that business has to call, the industry has to call every time they have a challenge. We want businesses to have someone like Mateo adopt the technology, but then be that champion in the business to say, I'm going to go ahead and bring in another robot. And so you don't need outside consultants every time you look to solve a challenge, but you have that capability in-house. This is a project that we worked on recently. The fabricator came to us and said, we've got this Cobot welder, and Cobot means collaborative robot, if anyone's not familiar. Collaborative meaning you can work next to it. Some of the industrial robots, the robots that build cars, you can't work anywhere near them because they're dangerous. So Cobot Welding, we're seeing adopted more and more in industry. What's really great about it is it's versatile and you can work alongside it. So this robot has an operator that's quite close proximity. And this fabrication company, or this manufacturer, makes parts for trucking, truck parts. And this Cobot welder was sitting in the corner for months under a tarp, which we see quite often. Someone goes to a technology integrator, they buy a bit of kit, and then it doesn't get adopted successfully and it sits under a tarp. And that's a bad success story, that's a bad case for us because it gives automation a bad name in the industry. So we came out and said, I can't get onto this company, they're based in Victoria and they can't send staff up to help train my guys how to use that, my team rather. So our in-house engineer worked with, what was his name? Hendrik? Worked with Hendrik over a couple of days to build his confidence up to the point where he was now programming that robot and we didn't need to come back. So what I mentioned before, we want to get their staff trained up to use robots. So what was a boilermaker sitting at a table for 4 hours of the day working on these really finicky parts, they could now just load the parts into a really simply made jig, and this robot will go all day long, will go all night long if you set it. Importantly, they're now building tables where they have this jig all the way around the table, so this robot can just move on to the next task. And because it's collaborative, that human worker can just walk in and grab that part and keep going with safety. So although you wouldn't go that close to the welder, you have that option with a collaborative robot. So we didn't create this robot system. They are commercially available, but we just help them with the training. And I always include it because it's good to show people the capability of what a Cobot welder can do. So it's got limitations just like any technology, but if Hendrik can set this thing up, you can produce way more of those parts without having a boilermaker sit there all day long. So the benefit is they've got a job that's working more hours and they don't have to rely as heavily on boilermakers, which as we all know are few and far between these days. So that is something that some of our partners are trying to solve, the skill shortage when it comes to boilermakers. But as a bridging the gap, this technology is fantastic if you're producing a lot of parts that you can program. And they're relatively easy to program as well. If you bring that sort of welding wand to the point where you want to weld and move it and ask it to record, then it will do that program each time. So they are getting easier to program. This is an example of an industrial robot. So you've seen a collaborative, this is the next step. I visited this business not long ago, and it's Bernard and his wife that's running it. But they produce a huge number of parts that these are pool fences. He bought this robot off an integrator, and it's an example of an industrial robot welder. So you see the differences is there's a huge jig, it's in a large footprint safety cage, and it's really meant for jobs that are fixed into a jig that aren't moving around. So Bernard spends a bit of time setting up the part for welding, but then when he gets it into the jig, you make sure all the pieces are aligned, because you do have to do that with a lot of welding systems. Standard systems don't have vision, which means if the part is out of alignment, the welder could just weld in open space. So you have to make sure your parts are in a fixed jig, and that jig is really robust and set up well and straight. Apologies for the small size of the video. That was back when I was learning. I realised I needed to turn the camera that way. But if you can just put up with the thin vision, I thought I did a pretty well graphic design transition. So Bernard's just setting this up. You can imagine trying to weld top and bottom of this thing all day long. It'd be awkward. So it takes him, I think, 5 minutes to set up the jig, from setting up the verticals and the horizontal. And then the jig's got a rotisserie, basically, for lack of a better word. And then when you come around the side, the industrial robot fires up and just will move along the top rail and just weld each piece in section. So you can imagine the Boilermaker trying to do that, the pace, how long it would take. So the considerations with this type of setup is fantastic when you're doing a huge volume of parts and really linear parts. It's great at. So UAP won't get one of these robots because they do a lot of curved car style work, so it doesn't really make sense. So with any of the technologies, we ask people to come to us and say, hey, is this right for my business? And we can quickly say yes or no before you go out to someone that sells the kit, because their agenda is to sell the kit. Our agenda is to make sure your business gets the right bit of technology. So in this instance, Bernard was already on his journey. We turned up and said, you're actually doing fine. What do you need us for? And he said, well, I'm thinking about buying this other robot. Can you just give me some advice? But also, what grants are out there? And we connected in with the Gold Coast Manufacturing Hub recently, because they have a grant program announced, which is made for, as does Mackay, but I was looking at Deb's direction. So the Gold Coast Manufacturing Hub has a program where you can go out and increase the capability for advanced technology. So for Bernard, he represents a great candidate because, one, he's reached out to the ARM Hub and he's asked for assistance to verify his technology, but two, he's already on the journey. So in terms of looking at a client that has done the work, done the groundwork, and can build the business case easily as to how automation would help his business, he's a great candidate. But I think importantly, he approached outside consultants such as us just to see if he was on the right track and he was doing the right thing. So that's why we exist.
Excuse me. So the grant they got from the manufacturing hub was your guys' consultancy and for buying the equipment?
No, so that's only a recent introduction. Okay. So they'll be applying.
Sorry?
He hasn't got it yet.
Oh, okay.
Gold Coast one only opened the same time as Mackay ones that I know.
Yeah.
2 to 3 weeks ago, I think. Yeah.
But I'll let Deb talk to that. I'm not going to steal. That's very much Deb's going to talk through it. But this fund is an example of where he reached out and said what's available. And because of our network, working with regional hubs, it was a no-brainer. I'll be going to go talk to these guys. Jeff on the Gold Coast. Anyway, so these are some of the outcomes from UAP. Now, admittedly, I probably do have to update this slide deck because you'll notice the last date's 2019, but they have still been getting benefits. Really important note, they're now bringing work from China that was done in their China workshop. They're now doing it in Brisbane. Huge success story. Government's giving the big green tick every time they hear stuff like that. Their staff's got confidence to continue looking at R&D and looking at other grant programs to help their business. And they're increasing their cost competitive. So for their business, they've got growth, and you look at the employees getting bigger each year. So they're brilliant. Once this project was well underway, QUT and UAP said to the government, there needs to be someone out there doing this for everyone. And that's how the ARM Hub started. So this was the first project that the ARM Hub worked on before it was an entity, and then it became an entity formalised. Now, for those of you who have friends in the agricultural sector, this is a company just north of Brisbane. A few points there, that Australia's largest grower and supplier of ginger. But that industry was hit with a crop disease, which meant that they could no longer harvest and take the product direct to packaging or direct down the line. They had to actually have an intermediate step to say, we now have to have humans checking each part of ginger, and if it has a disease section, they need to cut it off by eye. But as you know, with manual workers, things can be missed, and also manual labour isn't available all the time, and the human eye can only see so much. So we've included this case study as an example of the benefits of machine vision. So they found a partnership with the Queensland Ginger Industry Alliance, which made perfect sense for a ginger farmer, and they secured funding to investigate what technology could help them solve this challenge, which is we have a huge crop of ginger, but it's infected, so we need to remove parts of it. So we worked with them to look at how computer vision and AI could detect disease. So that's what workers are presented with, and that's the challenge they've got to deal with. You've got to look at that and quickly, as it's moving past, identify what parts need to be cut away. So we talk about machine vision as having an increased capability over the human eye. What I mean by that is if you can see something, you're only used to what you're used to. A robot or machine vision can see much more. So with machine vision, if you can see it, then the next step is you can do something with that vision. So if you couple a machine to be able to quickly identify where the disease root, part of the root is, then you can have a machine quickly cut that away. And you're cutting it away in a way that's not reducing the actual good part of the crop. You're only cutting away the exact part that's diseased. So you're maximising your output and you're maximising your efficiency by not having a human eye trying to work out where this crop disease is. So this project's ongoing. They've got to the point now where they can confidently say, if we run this ginger underneath this camera, we can see where the disease is. The next step is the Ginger Ninja, which is a cool name, to cut that part away using a robot with a knife, for lack of a better word. It's pretty simple, but if you can do that at a speed, then this conveyor can just move straight through and that robot can just be cutting on-stop. So you've got cut parts that are the exact portion you need to remove, and you've got a good quality stock that's moving through. And again, you're decreasing your reliance on manual interpretation or human interpretation of what's a good part or what's not. So yeah, just to recap, utilize computer vision. It's better than the trained human eye, and it means you've got less waste in the business. Rton, is anyone familiar with this company? This is a success story out of the Arm Hub. They were the first tenant in both during the bid stage and when we were confirmed as an entity. They were in our shed and they came to Arm Hub and said, we've developed a crane stabilisation unit. Can you help us with robots to manufacture? And we quickly realised that they actually needed data experts because they're trying to do safety lifts. So coming to us for one challenge, when we understood their business and understood their product, we were able to connect them in with the right data and AI experts to help develop their product further to make it a better product offering. So with these guys, we also helped them connect in with different grant programs that were relevant for their project because they were looking at advanced technology, they had an element of research, and it was quite innovative product. So if any of you in here are thinking about developing a product that has a technology side, or you're looking at taking something of an idea and moving it through to commercialization, we can help with that. As Mel touched on before, we've got experts in the technology space, but we've got experts in the design and business case space as well. So it's a good offering in that sense. So we quite often helping people develop their products further, not just how they build their products. I've got a pretty cool inspirational video which actually shows the tech. Every time we show this, there's always some person in the room that's interested to talk to them. But it sits between the load and the top of the crane. Traditionally, you would have had someone walk down the street or walk down the area with a line to stabilise the lift as it's moving up and down. They've now got this remote control unit that can move your load as you're doing lifting operations. So for a construction company trying to move something up in a tight space in the city, brilliant. You can do this with the remote control. It's a lot safer, it's a lot more efficient. And this is where they're doing testing, is outside our shed at Northgate. So they've now moved on. They've got their own manufacturing facility in South Brisbane, or Southwest Brisbane. And then they're now working in markets all around the world. More recently been picked up to replace wind turbines in the North Sea, where before they used to have 2 boats to try and stabilise either side of a giant wind turbine in the ocean. Now they've just got one ship using this stabilisation unit, which does the job much more smarter and more effectively. So an excellent example of a company coming to us at a startup phase, and our expertise and manufacturing space in North Brisbane, which is available if anyone's thinking about setting up operations in Brisbane and needs an affordable floor space. They've grown their business and have launched to the next phase. So, but again, not just about how they make their product, but it's how they develop their product in partnership with the Arm Hub and other funding bodies. Again, usual key points that speak to the benefit. Continued R&D, more staff, increase their exposure to global markets, and they're looking at a range of technologies to be developed rather than just a robot to build the unit. This is an example of a business that looked to, how am I going for time by the way, Mel?
Start at 5 past.
Okay, we're okay, I'll probably speed up time a bit then. This is an example of a company that was a traditional facade inspection company, and they realised that they should digitise their process to make it a more efficient but more accurate process. So bolton's system, which they developed is this unit here, which will fix to the side of a building and move up in a number of paths and do a facade inspection. Traditionally, it was done by sending 2 people over the side of the building. Now, depending on if that person had a big night out the night before, they might not be looking as hard for cracks in the building. They also, need to say there's also the safety risk of sending people over the side of a building. And then the reporting, for a facade engineer to produce a report for a building manager, it takes days, it takes weeks, it takes a long time. So they said, how do we automate this process? Well, we can't have drones in the city because CASA won't let you fly drones in the city, pretty simple. So they developed a system that could fix onto existing infrastructure, such as window washing equipment or hoists. And this camera will move up and down the building, stabilised by these fans, and take images, again, using computer vision, and which can see more than the human eye, and actually take an accurate representation of that building front. And that spits out a digital dashboard. So once you've got data capturing on that scale, you can then start to automate how you present that information. So they're now saying to building owners, if you use our technology, we can scan your whole building and overlay over a CAD layout and show you an exact defect in one point, and you can zoom in, you can add tags, you can add a maintenance report that says this needs to be fixed in the next 2 or 3 years, and you can pump out that report in a matter of hours rather than days. So they're improving their service offering, and now they're selling the service, which is scan the facade, and then they have this digital dashboard that facility managers can use. So why we show this as a case study is it's an example of a company that has a manual process, and they said, well, how do I digitize that to make that better? How can I turn that into something where I'm now offering a service to my customers that's an improved offering? So the Arm Hub ran a design workshop with them to help develop this product to do just that. So they already knew, they were already experts in facades and they were engineers, so they already knew what the tech needed to do, but they didn't exactly know how to package it up in a unit that could do the job. So we helped them with that. So they've created 5 new jobs. They've brought in student interns, which is fantastic for the business because it means that they can go out and get some really good talent in the business to help them work on the technical aspects of it. They're anticipating some fantastic new positions in the next year, and they're also working with some great clients, including the Queensland Government, to scan some buildings. So their technology is really relevant. If you all remember Grenfell, when the facade caught on fire in a building, their technology is more and more relevant.
They're offshoring that too, so they're moving into, so there's nothing like that globally, so it's a product that'll go in Singapore and America initially.
Yeah, any urban environment can benefit from a facade inspection tool of that nature. So again, example of digitising the process. There was a business we met not long ago in Townsville that replaces glass for trucks. And they were saying to us, how do I digitise this process so that I don't have to send someone out all the way to a mining site, scan it up, come back, create it, and then send it out. So we're helping them with that. So why I mentioned it is if there's a process that you're doing now that takes a long time, that's done by hand, talk to us if you want to try and think of ways to do it smarter. This company is a commercial laundry service. Every part of their laundry service is automated except for one part, which takes towels from a giant bin and puts it on a conveyor belt. It's a really hot and sweaty position that no one likes doing, and it's really hard to automate. With robots, they like defined edges. They like straight points, and they like corners, sharp things. So David, our in-house engineer, found a university paper online that said, well, it's technically possible to look at a towel using computer vision and identify 2 corners. And so David put a towel in front of computer vision and captured data for a number of days in order for the computer to then understand where they might pick up a towel. And then there's really quick proof of concept where he said, look, if a robot could identify a towel out of a bin, and if that bin was near a robot arm, the robot could identify the corner and pick it up and start to bring it through a mandrel and put it in a way that could be processed down the line in the factory. This is a challenge that all commercial integrators didn't want to touch. So this company was saying, we want to automate it, but we don't know who to talk to. So they came to us and said, well, let's just run a short, sharp proof of concept to see if it's even feasible. And so once the client saw David do this quick mock-up in our shed in a couple of days, they said, right, with the COVID relief fund that they had, let's explore this project further. Now it's getting to a point where David and our other engineers are looking to integrate that on their site. And the next step is they will keep the IP and they can sell that to the rest of the laundry industry. So they came to us with a challenge that commercial robotic integrators didn't want to touch because they don't have the time really to spend on speculative projects that might not work, whereas the Arm Hub has an in-house engineering team that for a really short, sharp commercial sprint can show them that the technology can actually do the job. So once we proved that a robot could do it and lay the towel out flat, the next step was to do the machine vision, the next step is to implement it, and then they'll have a commercial product. We don't exist to take people's ideas. So they came to us with that idea, we develop it, and then we give everything back to them. So off you go, because we're not a commercial entity. So with the fully automated laundry, they'll be able to allocate workers to different areas of their shed. So we're not removing jobs. Those workers don't have to sit in that hot, sweaty room anymore, and they can now sell this product as a package to the rest of the industry. So that's brilliant for their business. So just a quick summary of technologies we've spoken about today. So computer vision, if you can see it, there's a way to manipulate it. Computers can see a lot more. Augmented reality is fantastic for design, but also when you're manufacturing, we're now seeing Boilermakers wear the technology. Design software is very important. If you design in a 2D way, is there a way that you can do it smarter? Virtual reality, scanning parts, machine learning to let a machine see something and then actually know it. Robot manipulation, cutting ninja, that's robot manipulation. Data analytics, collaborative robots and industrial robots. So they're just some of the things we spoke about today that we're quite often talking to SMEs about. I'll now pass you over to Will. Yeah. Well, do you want me to plug your slides?
No, this one first.
Yeah.
Go for it. Thank you, Lewis. Hi. So I'm going to talk about cobotics. Lewis mentioned that actually you don't really want a robot behind a cage all the time, you want to be interacting with it. And cobotics is the name for these robots that interact closely with humans. And the government funds lots of grants, and we've got a grant through Professor John Roberts, who's our colleague, on looking at Australian cobotics. So it's $8 million from the government, $7 million of in-kind. A lot of the grants we put forward to the government, it's in-cash contributions or in-kind contributions from the company, and then the government will then match it. We help facilitate that type of grants. So people get expertise, they get linkages for about half the price it normally costs. Lots of partner organisations, lots of universities will collaborate together with experts from QUT, UTS, etc. to actually bring in this expertise to the companies. And this one has lots of research programs that are tailored to the companies what they need to find, as well as doing cutting edge work. And these are the partners from the universities, Swinburne, UTS, etc., to Cook Medical, Infobuild, Weld Australia, PR Enclosures. So the idea is to have different companies with different expertise, but the same type of problem coming together. And the idea is, for this project, is to train the next generation of engineers, look at the actual link between universities and companies, strengthen the ability to do collaborative robotics with people, and drive the competitiveness of the sectors and growth. So it's the link between all of these different And the idea is it's split into 5 different research themes. And one is to look at how humans work with robots, how the robots can start to do computer vision, how they can start to do the touch and the feedback, the haptic type interfaces. Looking at designing robots that people want to work with, because robots are nice and good at doing the work, but are they friendly? Are they interesting? Are they some interface that do it? One of the things they found is that people work better with robots if you name the robot. If you call the robot Fred, people are much happier to work with Fred. If you call it Amelia is much easier to work with than just robot number 10. So it's actually naming robots is really important. How do people then work with the systems in terms of everyday work? Make sure that it still hits the ISO standards, make sure that we can actually say that once the robot's done the work, it still meets the requirements of the company. And looking at the impact of putting robots in the workforce. How does that impact people? How does it work with getting rid of the dull jobs, etc.? If you want to find out more about that, there's a big website there on australiancobotics.org, there's Twitter and LinkedIn, etc. And even though this is a started training centre, there's still opportunities to get involved with it. It will grow over the next 5 to 6 years, and John will be very happy to do that. I believe I'm going to need you to switch to the next.
Yeah, so I've got them lined up, so give me 2 seconds.
Presentation. And whilst Lewis is doing that, does anybody have any questions on robotics or any of these slides?
Case studies.
Or the
Have
case
any
studies.
questions on the case studies?
We'll stick around a bit for the end as well.
How accurate is this stuff? Like before he marked out this spiral or whatever, how accurate is it actually? Is this within a mil or?
Yeah,
Yeah.
very good question. Can be within a mil, 1 or 2 mil. It's getting better. So with that project, it's an artwork. So if it looks great, that's a really big point. But if you're doing something that's precise engineering, it probably isn't at that point yet. It needs to be 0.0001 millimeter perfect. But for majority of welding large items, it's great. So the considerations with all those things that we can help you through. But yeah, that's about 1 millimeter, 1 or 2 millimeters tolerance, and then the next few years it'll getting better as the technology's developed. But it's really accessible technology. It's not very expensive. You can go out and buy them off the shelf and you can just put them in, play around with the business.
So the robot fabricators, when they do the metal, that's down to about 0.1 millimeters. The accuracy of the big robots now is down to micron. But they're the big, fixed, well-calibrated robots. The augmented reality glasses, about 1 mil is what you're going to get.
Yeah.
If you want to put things like fiducial markers on there, so the AR has something to fix that helps enormously. So last week I was watching a robotic knee surgery where one of the first procedures they do when they cut open your knee is put 2 pegs there, and the robot, yes, I spent half the time sitting down while actually watching it.
It came back white.
So they have to put 2 fiducial markers actually into the knee in order to calibrate it, and that goes down to the 0.3 millimeter in order to shave the top of the tibia off. So they're using augmented reality in things like knee replacement surgeries in order to figure out what's going on. So it's, I'm not going to make jokes about cutting edge because it literally isn't.
I can see some good applications with quality assurance stuff where you continue comparing what the welding guy's doing to the 3D drawing that did. So you can pick up defects straight away rather than wait till the end of the process.
Oh, exactly, and all of this is being...
And training, used a lot for training too, so particularly now that haptics are getting better too, you can buy, I've seen Telstra Purple do one, but you can buy training packages, for example. I've seen a company do a changeover for their machine, and it's all done in VR and AR, and it means they can really quickly get people trained on what you need to do in that changeover before you actually have to get them on the floor, much less disruptive to your operation, and quicker to get people to understand the process. Yeah.
They can run the plant much faster with the new person on board, whereas
Yeah.
previously they had to slow it down in order to get the person trained. But now you can go up to sort of 80% speed really quickly because they've already had some AR training. That's an area.
You get the
That was
robot
not
to slap them if they get it wrong.
Yeah. Some of
I
these
don't-
things too, I think the reason why we're also seeing a lot more adoption is, you know, we're getting to this critical point now where skills shortages or skills challenges are just escalating, and the cost of these technologies is starting to come down. And yes, it's not super cheap, but it's still, relatively speaking, you're starting to see a much better ROI, and you're starting to see solutions being adopted in much more relatable ways.
So just even using 3D scanners to, again, continually update
Yes.
where the production's going and what
Yes.
parts have been added to it.
Yes.
I'm going to talk a little bit about digital twins in this, and that's exactly what we want to do. You actually get the vision system to build a model of your plant, build a model of what's happening, updated in real time. So you've got a record of what's going to happen and what could happen in the future. I love this quote, especially because a lot of what AI is doing is trying to predict what's going to happen in the future, where you need to maintain something, etc. Yogi Bear, not the cartoon character that likes picking baskets, a famous American baseball coach. Has lots of different quotes, and it's very tricky to make predictions. And Gartner make lots of predictions. This is the hype cycle. This is for 2010, and this is what it thought was going to be coming into the world in 10 years' time. So flat panel TVs and displays. Yeah, I think it got that quite right, standing in front of this one. Pen-centric tablet PCs, yep, there's a few around here. Human augmentation, not huge. So sometimes the autonomous vehicles, it was kind of thinking what was going, gesture recognition. So microblogging thought was a good thing. Broadband over power lines, that was the trough of despond where it did get it. So predictions of what's going to happen. So 2021 predictions. Yeah, if it's going to. So these are the ones it thinks are going to be coming in the next 5 to 10 years. So informed AI decision making, generative AI, AI augmented software engineering, all of these things that it considers to be the things that are going to be affecting your businesses in the next 5 to 10 years. And I'll talk a little bit about these things. And people are talking about the fourth industrial revolution as the next hype. And that's looking at where technology blurs the lines between the physical, digital, and biological sphere. So we're talking about augmented reality, we're talking about digital twins, we're talking about collaborative robotics. We're starting to blend all of these technologies together so you're working in the virtual world, the digital world, the real world seamlessly. And so looking at the polishing of the curved surface, so this was the final version of the Kingfisher that Lewis talked to. And he has his 2 meters tall, and you can just go and pat it on the full shores of Brisbane if you want to. And something like this little feet here, and the curved surface of the feet was done in a small scale wooden macaque. And how do you actually create that? Well, you create a digital world of it, and that's the scanned version of it and how it's met. Then you get a robot to actually sculpt out the pattern from it. You then get human beings to actually pour in the aluminium. Once you've got the aluminium cast, you then need to actually start to smooth it, and you can use the robot in the digital world to smooth it. And that's what's really nice, because you've got the digital pattern that tells you what it should be like, and you've got the real world thing that you've created, and then you're trying to match the two things together and record, as you were saying, what's actually happened and how well it's been done. And you can record it after you've done the scanning in really high detail. So you can do the simulation, work out what the right paths are, work out what the right tooling is, work out how long it's going to take you to do all of these things, and work out where you've got any defects, work out what you need to do next at the different projections. So you're not just looking at one area, you're recording this. And this was a few years ago, and we're looking at it now. You can go back and see what had happened, why did it happen, what was the tool paths. So you've got this digital record of what's happening, and you can go back and interrogate what's actually been done. And you can see what detail you can do it in. So even though this is only a small piece or foot size, you can see using these digital techniques, these AI-based approaches, you can get an incredible amount of detail about what's been happening and how the situation has been improved. And you can do this in multiple ways. So this is a staircase, and as you can see, every part here is different shaped. So you've got some designer that's gone, I want a really interesting staircase, how on earth do I do this? And you can see that it's been a digital model that they've been able to design with a computer and manufacture it from a computer into the real world. So it doesn't have to be in practical arts projects, you can do real world situations. And this is very much Industry 4.0, which is one of the technologies we're interested in. So you've got the automation, the sensing, the actuation, the workflows, connectivity, the Internet of Things devices. So when you've got your products with little RFID tags on to tell you where they are. You've got IoT, one of the devices out there is the Apple dongles that you put onto cars so you can track where your car is. It stops people walking off with them. You've got the data, machine learning, planning and insights. That's something that I'm very interested in, how you do the data. And the robotics up here is very much what the Arm Hub is centered around. And this is David with his with his towel folding. So you've seen this video before. I spoke earlier about the robot manipulation. We can really manipulate people. This is the Da Vinci robot rather than the Stryker one that was doing the kneecaps. But you're starting to see robots really interacting with human beings in a very physical sense. It doesn't have to be as flashy as operating theatres. This is just a really nice one with Omon, who have a relationship with the Arm Hub. They rent some of the space from us, and they just have a robot that takes bakery out of the oven when it's done. As simple as that. So rather than having someone sat around waiting for the pinger to go off, once it goes off, the robot just picks up the buns and goes where it needs to go. So simple problems that take time is a really good use of a robot. Robots are also very good at lights out manufacturing. They can work in the dark. So if you've got something overnight that needs doing, and we're working with Orcon, and they're very interested in saying, right, okay, we know that our delivery drivers drive during the day. However, the stacking of the pallets we can do overnight. So is there a way we can say, right, let's do all of this job when it's lights out and no one's around, we can get the robots running, and in the morning, when the people come onto work, all the things that they needed to do for the day is set up ready to go. So using the dead time of a factory in order to increase productivity. Generative AI, that was one of the things on the hype cycle. Well, what is generative AI? Well, this is a structure that goes over a pergola in Italy, and the idea is you want to cover a roof like that, you have certain structure points, and you want to be able to work out what the best shape is. And we could allow the system to design these shapes and generate the new forms like the staircase, and to optimize the forces, the structures. It's not designed just for design's sake. You can also put it into systems that work out the stresses, the structures, the force, and it's an engineered solution rather than just an aesthetic solution. Looking at customization. So also in the Arm Hub, we do removal of systems in order to figure out what is a sort of additive manufacturing and depletive manufacturing that's depletive, but we also have sheet forming, so we can form sheets using robots to interesting, bespoke, one-off type patterns. Yeah, no longer one robot, one job. So we saw those welding robots. It doesn't have to just weld that one part. You can reprogram it and it can have several bays and it can weld different parts. You can combine the strengths of the human being, the ability to lenish versus the ability just to repeat the task over again. We can augment old systems with new systems. So working with Orcon, they've got a large amount of infrastructure and assets. And they don't or can't, it would be silly to replace everything and start from fresh. One of the nice things about robotics and AI is to incrementally improve them. As Lewis mentioned, that's something that we're seeing with companies. So put in one robot, a few months later they'll put in another, or they'll change it and they'll gradually up. And the idea of these robots is they're much more flexible than the old school car assembly robots. Looking at capacity to work with humans and robots. So it's not humans being replaced by robots. It's robots complementing humans to make humans' lives easier and to grow the business in that way. And it's definitely driven by the data and analysis. As Neil was saying, once you've done something with a robot, you've also got the data of what's happening. You've also got what worked well, and if something's gone wrong, what didn't work well, and how you can then improve it. It's not a one-shot, forget about it. You do it once, you improve it, and improve it. Yeah, low cost of entry. Some of the robots now are 30 to 40,000 for ones that are just going to work 24/7, 365 days a year. They're not as expensive as they used to be. Easy prototyping. What's nice about the Arm Hub, we have these types of robots. If you're unsure about whether a robot's going to work with you and you don't want to invest, say, 100k in the whole setup, you can come to us and say, look, can you try this? Can you see if this is going to work for you? Flexible, less safe, faster setup, collaborative. So the robots are becoming much more easy to integrate than they were, say, a decade ago. Yeah, there are some gaps in how we see robots in industry and how we see Australian manufacturing. Trying to be more flexible and agile. So rather than just have one product repeated 1,000 times, you may have 1,000 customers wanting one different product each time. Robots can help people be much more agile. The idea of more intelligence coming on, so the data, etc., the volumes and interconnectedness works well. And we want to be a little bit more resilient. So we're talking about more AI, more digital twins, but we've also got to make sure it's secure to cyber attacks, etc. So cybersecurity, we need to make sure that all the robotics, all the AI in that is safe from adversarial attacks. Digital twins, we also want to take these models that we're producing and be able to have them online and work out what to do them. There's a lovely idea that we have ideas and we have thoughts because they fail in the stead of actually doing it. And the idea with digital twins is you can try stuff, and if it doesn't work, you know it doesn't work in the digital world, not in the actual world, and that can be really powerful. And explainable AI, that's in the next 5 to 10 years, you'll hear a lot more about that. So the robot will explain to the person why it's doing something. I'm going to pick you up this screwdriver and pass it to you because I can see that you're about to screw this part in, or I'm going to turn this bit here because I can see it's easier for you to wear. So the robot will start to have these communications and talking to how the plant works. I think you should slow down manufacturing here because I can sense that you've got a vibration in this gearbox and I just want to check it's not about to fail on you. And we're putting all of this transformative tech into a research hub. So as John Roberts has got one on collaborative robots, we're going to have one on digital twins going up next year. So if anybody's interested in the idea of digital twins, come and speak to me afterwards. And finishing off with a quote about the future, and this is an Asimov quote, and it's not just about predicting the future, it's about making the future happen. I really think the Arm Hub is a really good place to help people make the robotics as part of the future part of the company. And in that, I'll hand you back to Lewis.
Do you want to speak next before we go on?
Yep.
Yeah.
Thanks. I hope everyone found that really, really interesting and thought-provoking. And not only think about what you, I guess, what's out there at the moment, but what the future might be for your business as well. So, firstly, I was going to get you to take out your phones and scan the. Someone's pointing to me to walk over this way somewhere. Scan the image. It's literally 4 questions, so you can do it while I'm talking. I'm not really bothered. But that's just part of the funding agreement that Neil and I have to get you to respond to the questions.
That's how you get paid.
That's how Neil gets paid. That's right. They can give you more money.
Okay.
So yeah.
So do it.
And I think there's a box at the end there about, maybe some, other information or something. I guess for me, it's certainly really interesting. I'm keen to get feedback from you, what value you've got out of it, what you've got interest in particular. I know some of you, we're doing site tours over the next 2 days to have further discussions about your business. I think based on some of the things I picked up the other day in Deb's presentation, for those of you that were there, the Patagonia case study about what they've done cultural wise, and then looking at what UAP is that? Yeah. UAP you know, the culture they've got there now with their staff really engaging and trying to look at how they can, you know, being so proactive in what they can do with robotics to improve their work type thing. So I think there's one element is the actual technology itself, but the other is the culture within your organisation. So I'm probably keen to hear if that's something further you want to investigate as well, about how you not only implement the technology, but we can help with knowledge or what we can do as governments between Devon, myself and Neil and Rin, you know, what is out there to help you understand what you can do cultural wise to move your organisation into that space as well. Because I think that's kind of critical to make sure you've got people on board, particularly where we are, overcoming that stigma that robots are going to take their jobs. So, you know, it's important for you all individually to have that capability to bring your organisation along with it as well. So just quickly, I just want to let you know, I think I know pretty much everyone in the room now, but in case I missed that bit, I'm Adrian Rourke, now the Central Queensland Regional Manager for Oz Industry, and I'm here today with Neil, our growth facilitator, the one with a small amount of money, that he now says. So we're the sponsors of this today. I have brought Hub here to Mackay because we obviously see it value, and some of the feedback of where businesses are at ready to adopt this technology, and we obviously see value in what Hub can do to help you do that. Is it just that one?
Yes.
So really, I've only got one slide, and this is it. We're just trying to quickly summarise, you know, there is a wide range of support available from the federal government to help you on what you're trying to do in your business. So, you know, there's obviously 27 regional managers like me around the country, and then a whole heap of facilitators like Neil across the board in a range of different areas. R&D tax incentive, you know, something that every business should be looking at if they're doing some R&D, and where there's the opportunity to register for that and get that. I've got some flyers over there behind Lewis if you want to take some stuff on R&D or some of the other things I'm talking about. Otherwise, any of this, get in contact with myself, or, you know, Neil, while he's under growth, he can always direct you to other people as well, and we can connect you with further information as well with it. Innovations Connections, I think, is one thing the Hub would have been involved with. That is a program where it's helping businesses who have a problem and don't know the solution, and there's facilitation support and funding for projects to engage with researchers to actually find that solution. Obviously, venture capital, fair bit of venture capital support on our website. Accelerate commercialisation, you know, that's certainly one of the projects you look at, you know, certainly where that linen company is up to. It's got a novel idea about to commercialise it. Before that stage of commercialisation is where the Accelerate Commercialisation program can get involved with facilitation support and then grant funding. So some of you may have seen some of the videos that we've done recently with Bayron, who one of our local companies that access that twice with what they've done with their sensors. And then growth services. Neil, do you want to do your quick spiel?
Yeah, again, there's a couple of services with the growth one. There's the growth roadmap that we do, and then there's the
High growth accelerator.
Yeah, high growth accelerator, and you can get 20 grand from both of those, and they're eligibility criteria, so you don't have to go through the process of being selected.
Yeah, they're not competitive. Yeah. So you know, whether I know a few have done them recently, but others, it's every 5 years.
Yeah.
For that. So, you know, if you haven't done it, get in contact. It's a really good program just to help with your overall business and what you can get out of that. But then going forward, you know, there's other opportunities as well. It sets you up with some good funding to improve some of your business structures or processes. Modern Manufacturing Initiative has gone through Stream 1. It's a part of the overall strategy of the federal government. Potentially might be another stream coming out before the next election. We just wait and see. That's obviously the bigger grants, you know, their minimum of $1 million, they're really to do that digital or that transformation of your business or new industries. So they're quite significant. There's other things like the Northern Australia Development Business Development Program, which is out at the moment, and there's a flyer about that. They're helping existing businesses diversify or grow So there's certainly some things that you could look at doing with your digital transformation. Minimum grants, match funding of $50,000 up to $2 million. So there are opportunities for you. They're all competitive, so different to the growth services, which is eligibility. They are a competitive space, but certainly we've seen the likes of Diacon get the first round of Modern Manufacturing Fund, and then CQ Field Mining Services got $1 million in the second round. They were bigger grant programs, so we are seeing that happening in our region in that space as well. So there's certainly it takes investment to put in for those competitive grants, and we can certainly provide some guidance on that. But there is government support when you're kind of doing those larger, bigger projects. So yeah, then that's the website there to kind of do some searching. But I would, best option is to give me a call. Have a chat about your project, what you're doing. But between Deb and myself, we kind of refer each other across to different programs, and then get more detail and connect to you that way. It's an ongoing process. It might not be now, it might not be in 6 months, it might be in 2 years, but there's always going to be some sort of government support there available. So that was it, I think, from me, and I think Deborah's going to give you a quick update on.
The Innovation Department also just released a grant that's for regional innovation. It's a bit of a different one. It's not individual businesses, it's where you've got a collaboration across businesses, maybe with local councils or government partners, and you're trying to work across that group to get a collective change. But that's up to $200,000 cash, 1:1 matching, including in-kind matching. So yeah, if you've got a supply chain
resource
thing,
industry network to look at.
Yeah, or looking at, I saw it as a really good one if you're trying to do a program on capability building. It's exactly the kind of thing that they would be looking for.
Yeah.
Hello, Deb from the Manufacturing Hub, and Laura down the back there as well from the Manufacturing Hub. I've just been asked to talk briefly about our Manufacturing Hub grants program, because one of the services that is an eligible project is services supporting the Hub. Importantly to remember that the round isn't going to close until the end of, June 2024. So like Adrian said, it's not so much about rushing in and getting these things done. It might be that you're not ready now, maybe you're ready in 2 years' time. The funding will still be there unless we've handed it all out already, but I expect that that we will have funding through to June 2024. So get yourself set up and then apply for the funding, whether that means engaging the Hub to be helping with that whole process, or really working with different agencies to be able to understand what's best for your business rather than just rushing in and doing something for the sake of it. So the grants program supports our delivery model, which we talked about a little bit the other day. I'll just review shortly. The Queensland Advanced Manufacturing 10-year Roadmap Action Plan, and the Advanced Robotics for Manufacturing, so the Hub. So they're the three key things that you need to be thinking about if you're wanting to apply for the Manufacturing Hub's grants program, which is up to $200,000 matched funding. So the delivery model, business development programs, skills development and training, and awareness of advanced manufacturing. So that's why we're here. And I think it's great that Mackay actually now has a manufacturing hub. Other regions did receive their manufacturing hubs before Mackay, and the reasoning the government always gave was that Mackay was doing so well. But those who were at the breakfast the other day, it was really great to get all of that feedback, because what we really identified was that, there are some production areas that can definitely be improved upon, and I think that, being able to tap into what you guys need and deliver programs over the coming years to be able to really focus on those areas is going to see more efficiencies in production and increased profits and jobs and all of those things that everybody wants for their business. So the Advanced Manufacturing 10-year Roadmap is halfway through, and there's a new one being developed at the moment to see us through over the next 10 years, but that's readily available online. Just look up Queensland Advanced Manufacturing Roadmap and really understand what the Queensland Government is wanting to do to advance manufacturing, and that will help you position yourself for your funding as well. eligible businesses, it's pretty straightforward. Again, that's all online, but as long as you're mostly doing manufacturing, that your project is going to support your transition to advanced manufacturing. You have a registered for GST and hold an ABN, and you're based here in Queensland, in our region. And those are the eligible activities, and it can be a combination of, we don't want just to go out and say, oh yeah, I want to get a robot, but I'm not going to have skills and training to make sure that that's being implemented properly. It can be a combination of, and of course there's activities that aren't eligible. We won't pay for a consultant to come up and help work on that assessment, and there's all sorts of things, but the detail is in the information online, and if you're not sure, we're here to help you out with that as well before you put your application in. And that's it from me, and happy to take any questions as well.
Is there any
Before we
questions?
jump to questions though, can I just formally say that thanks very much to Oz Industry and also the Department of Manufacturing. Oz Industry really made it possible for us to be here, covered all of our flights and expenses, and the Department of Manufacturing, our time to be here. So if it wasn't for Oz Industry, there's no way we would have been able to come. So thank you.
And your taxes.
So make the most of it. Ask many questions.
Not to mention all the emails Adrian had to deal with before to make it happen. Yeah. So questions?
It's good. Real comprehensive.
Yeah, so we're going around, Adrian's done a lot of work to coordinate a program, and we're seeing 6 businesses over this next 2 days, and we'll be doing, what I forgot to say, which was very naughty, is that what the core funding pays us for is for Hub to come and do a site visit and a technical assessment, which is a free observational assessment with engineers looking across your production and having a look at where your bottlenecks are and where the potential opportunities, knowing what our folks know about where technology is readily at versus where are the next steps, give you a bit of a sense of what's accessible now for you and versus what might be coming. And then from there you can get a bit of a feel for, well, where's your best investment likely to be? How do you start your journey? And then we can do cost recovered things to help you bridge that if it's not a readily accessible commercial thing for you. If there's a step you need to take, we can help to de-risk some of that process for you. So hopefully that all made sense of what the process might look like. But yeah, certainly the technical assessment part of it, that's all paid for, done and dusted, and we come and do that for you.
And if you missed out on us seeing in this 2 days, give us a call, send us a video, we can have a look at what you do that way. So if we're not coming up here in a few weeks, then we can at least look at your business through just a one-on-one interaction with you. But I'm asking people to send us videos because it means I can get more engineers looking at it straight away rather than waiting for a flight to come up in a few weeks.
That's right.
So yeah, modern technology is pretty good. So if we're not physically at your site, send us a video.
I have a question.
Yes.
I know that the Hub currently has a sprint accelerator
Oh,
program
yes.
at the moment. Could you just
excellent.
talk to that,
Jodie,
please?
I love it. Yeah, so we've just launched also another potential source of support, which is called Sprints, and it's it's an AI accelerator program, and what we're essentially trying to do is get people to think about where AI might benefit their business and inject some resources and support into that. So you get $25,000 worth of that kind of service of feasibility proof of concept. So instead of cost recover, we give that for free.
And that's expression of interest closing
Yes.
January?
January the, I think it's January the
Early
7th.
Jan.
Yes.
Yeah, early
I
January.
will send you all the information about it.
Yeah, that's competitive. That's a competitive
Yes,
process.
it's competitive.
Yeah.
But what we're doing with that one, because effectively we want to try and help as many people as possible with the limited resources we've got, is we're having a shortlisting. So it's a very short application, which will cut it down to 10 industries, and we'll work with those 10 industries to give you some benefit straight up, and then 2 will get the full $50,000 package. Yeah. So even if you get into that 10, you'll still see some immediate benefit from that. Thank you. I feel like a team. We've never even met before today. But I think what you would have got the sense of, and what's really critical, is that each of the supporting services have different niche things they do. So we don't do that kind of business support at all. We're very much the technical acceleration piece. So the key thing is to tap into the different support services and help that all work together for your business.
I think a few businesses are held back by the definition of a robot.
Oh yeah.
Because, I mean, it's the whole continuum rather than just the robot thing at the end. It's, again, all the digital stuff in between.
Yes, and machining. So often we'll work with, so I'll give you an example. So I know we're called Advanced Robotics Manufacturing, so people just think, oh, we're going to come in and talk to them about robots, but we're working with a big steel company in their facility in Brisbane. And we are not doing anything at all with robotics with them yet. We may in the future, but actually what we've been doing with them is looking at the data that they already have access to within their business and helping them make some key decisions about some of their machining and potential robotic solutions in the future, but looking at machine learning and use of data. So yeah, it's often it's not actually about buying a piece of a robot. It's that might be part of the solution, but Industry 4.0 is much broader.
Yeah, a lot of businesses have started going down that digitising process now, and it's just continuing on from that.
Yeah, we're doing a lot more and more in that vision space, because one of the challenges with it is that businesses don't always know the value of the data they're collecting. You've got people on the shop floor, often there's often manual data collection processes, and because people, your folks, they know they've got to collect the data, but they've never really seen it used. They don't get necessarily all the critical elements of it. So for example, the project we were doing with this steel manufacturer, some key elements of their data were manually captured and the timestamps weren't accurate because they weren't critical before. But now it's like, well, actually, if we've got the right data, you can see a lot more across your business and you can make decisions more readily. So it becomes critical. And then vision systems can help you capturing it as you go. And vision systems aren't as expensive as robots, really. They're even cheaper.
With this steel, with this steel company, they were originally thinking that it was going to be a robot that's the solution, but actually the better solution already existed in terms of automation. So, for example, if a company wanted to move A to B and they wanted a robot to do it, in fact a 10 times cheaper conveyor would do it, we'll tell them to use a 10 times cheaper conveyor. We're not selling any product, we're not investing in it. We use the word robot in the title, but it doesn't, it's an automated system that is pre-existing. We will sell nothing, we're just advising on the best technology for a given solution.
We also do quite a bit of work with companies around design for manufacture, and not just design companies. So we're working. Can you do Young Guns? Can you talk about Young Guns?
Yeah, they're a company that unloads containers at distribution centres manually. And to us and said, how can we look at using technology to improve our efficiency? So even if we're shaving 10 seconds off unloading boxes onto a pallet, then we can do it across all our sites and we'll have a huge return. So our design experts are working with them to come up with a product to help them unload containers easier. So that's where we're connecting with our design expertise from university as well. So easiest way to explain this, if you're not sure, talk to us, talk to any of these people in the room, and there's usually a solution that we can steer you towards or come up with it internally.
The session we had earlier in the week was on lean manufacturing.
Oh yes.
And a lot of the data collecting will go to help.
Yeah, I mean often
justify that.
you shouldn't even really thinking about a robotic solution until you've really thought about that lean process, because if you haven't got your production working right, just shoving in a robot isn't going to fix the problem. You've actually got to really think about how it can flow most effectively, material flows, that kind of thing. Yeah, too right.
Yeah, so, you know, do we need to send an academic to your site or a student for a couple of weeks just taking a time and motion study? Why did you walk from that side of the room to that side of the room 3 times that day? You could have done it in no time. You could have just had that colour sitting there ready to go. So there are things you can do before automation that'll improve your business with outside help. It doesn't have to be, let's go straight to a robot.
And hopefully we've got a digital solution for your time and motion study, so you don't have to have someone with a bit of paper.
There's companies that have cameras set up, and then they'll just have the camera and they'll do heat maps of the traces. They'll do automatic identification of where people are in the factory and where they're going, what they're doing.
You can get to wear a watch and tracking where they go.
Exactly. And one of the reasons why I'm very interested in explainable AI, if people are being monitored 24/7 around a factory, they want to know why they're being monitored. We're only monitoring you to make your life easier so you don't have to do your wasted trips. We're not monitoring to see how many times you go to get coffee. You know, and if we are, well, that may actually make better coffee in a better place more suited.
We'll deliver.
With that, and that's probably comes back to the culture of it.
Yeah.
You know, the facilitator Deb had on Monday made the observation that I think it's from Sunshine Coast. They have smaller manufacturing businesses down there, less than 20 employees, but whereas up here we're bigger, probably 20 to 50-ish type thing. There's obviously a whole range, but you know we're probably slightly bigger on average in that size. But I guess it's interesting, you know, like I said, the cultural wise, but is there also initially, and it might not be Arm Hub, but others that kind of then give those presentations or introduction to the company, so that they're not, you know, freaking out that they're monitoring us to kind of see how, you know, make us work harder. They're going to make us work harder or something, you know, but actually to bring, introduce to your company about what the possibilities are, something similar to this. Is that, like, does Arm Hub do that initially as well if the client's going to go through that phase, or are there other people that kind of do that?
We've not been asked to, but there's no reason why we couldn't.
I just think sometimes it's, you know, that engagement of your own staff, the wider staff.
Yeah, so next year, based on the feedback that we received on Tuesday, we're going to be doing the probably 1 per quarter of the lean workshops, but then also alongside of that a cultural maturity piece, so which is all around people development. So those two things will tie nicely together to be able to then, and then we'll be doing some not funding the consultant, but if the business wanted to go on the journey with a consultant, then we are looking at paying for the accommodation and flights for the consultant to come to the region, and then they can work with those businesses. So they'll be happening once a quarter.
There might be something to think about, that it's not just, because a lot of time it's either, you know, the managers or the senior executive attending these things, and some of us, you need to be at that point where I want to start engaging my staff in it and get them to be comfortable with it, and also start, you know, being the ones putting forward suggestions like the gentleman was doing. You know, he's now kind of looking at his own ways with his own job. So there's got to be, you know, someone who can come and present to the staff as well, to tell them kind of about what the future is and all that type of stuff as well. So
I guess the other thing that we've done is, even though we focus on the technical, not so much the business and culture, is that we often work with companies around the technical problem that is really important to the staff. Like often it's like something that really they don't
like doing.
They don't like, it's really unsafe. It just annoys them that it's just been that way for so many years, and everyone knows it's unsafe, and no one's ever done anything about it. So we often we're called in and we don't look at something that's the biggest productivity issue. It's actually at the biggest pain point issue, and tackle that, and then that's part of bringing people into the journey, because they can see, oh my God, you know, you're actually doing something.
So
Trying to make it
change,
better.
change management process and
Dean's going to wrap us
getting
up.
the low hanging fruit.
The cricket
Yes.
starts in
Yeah,
half an hour. He's going to be at his desk.
Yeah, the cricket starts before then, so.
I hope it's not better than yesterday. Yesterday was great.
Sorry, Will.
You can tell my accent. I've been having a lot of grief in the last 24 hours.
I was being very nice, so I didn't mention it. All right, so we will wrap it up. It is past 9 now, so conscious that some people have got to get back to their businesses. So that's it's been a really good session, and hopefully it has raised probably more questions for you guys to go back to your businesses and have a bit of a think about. So if something does come up, please feel free to either contact myself, Deb, Adrian, Neil, or I saw Melissa's got some cards on the bench there. So please get in contact with us, and if I don't know the answer, we'll put you on the right person, or vice versa. So it's like I said at the start, this is really important, and I think a key component in us being regionally competitive going forward. So have a think about it. Thank you very much for giving up your time this morning and coming along. If you have a visit booked in, I'm sure it's going to be of great value. So thank you again. Thank you again to the Arm Hub for coming up. Thanks again to Adrian and Neil for supporting this, and of course thanks to Deb and Laura for being here as well. And have a great day, everyone.